You're 19 years old, standing outside a bus station that smells like diesel and wet concrete, and in about 20 minutes, you're going to watch yourself build a construction company that pulls in 20 million euros a year across Germany. Right now, though, you're just a Polish kid with 40 euros in your pocket, a duffel bag your mother packed for you 3 times because she kept adding things, and a jacket that isn't warm enough for where you're going. You're going to live in a room with 5 other guys and 1 bathroom that never quite gets clean, no matter who scrubs it. You're going to work for a foreman who calls you the wrong name because he never bothered learning the right one, because to him you're not really a person, you're a pair of hands with a Polish accent. You're going to catch yourself on a cross brace 4 stories up on a wet morning and lie awake all night doing math on how many more mornings like that your body can take. Years from now, you're going to sign against your own house to make sure 60 families get paid when a contract nearly buries you. But there's one thing you don't get to know yet: what all of this actually costs you to get there. Stay with it. This is the whole story. Picture the town you grew up in. It's small enough that everybody's grandmother knows everybody's business. A couple hours outside Rzeszów, the kind of place with 1 church, 1 bus that runs twice a day into the city, and fields that turn the same gold color every August whether anyone's watching or not. Your father worked at the same plant for 26 years. Your mother made bigos every Sunday that filled the whole house with the smell of cabbage and sausage and smoke, and you'd eat it at a table that had been in the family longer than you had. Your grades in school were fine, not good, fine. Nobody was writing you a scholarship letter, and the guidance counselor didn't exactly fight for your future either. Your father worked with his hands his whole life, and so did his father before him. And university was never really a conversation in your house. It just wasn't on the menu. What was on the menu was the meat processing plant, or the fields, or leaving. What tipped it for you was your cousin Marek. He'd been in Germany 2 years already, doing construction outside Frankfurt, and every time he came home for Christmas, he looked different. New boots that weren't falling apart at the seams, a phone that wasn't cracked down the middle. He'd sit at your mother's table, eat 2 full plates of pierogi like he'd been starving for Polish food the whole year, and then quietly hand your mother an envelope before he left. Nobody said anything about it. She'd just fold it into her apron pocket and put it away. You asked him once, out behind the barn where you 2 used to smoke cigarettes you weren't supposed to have, what it was actually like over there. He looked at you for a second like he was deciding how honest to be, and then he said, "It's hard, it's cold. The Germans don't care about you, and if you're smart about it, it's the best decision you'll ever make in your life." You were 18. You didn't need much more convincing than that. So you packed 1 bag, and then your mother repacked half of it because she thought you'd forgotten socks and a jar of her plum jam. The good kind, for emergencies, she said, though she never explained what kind of emergency a jar of jam was supposed to fix. Your mother cried at the bus station in that quiet way, where she pretended she wasn't. Your father shook your hand like you were leaving for the army instead of a construction site, gripped it a second too long, and said something short about making the family proud that you still think about sometimes. You crossed the border with a scrap of paper with a phone number for a room share in Offenbach, and absolutely no German beyond the words for hello and thank you. The first 6 months are a blur of concrete dust, diesel exhaust, and other people's language moving too fast around you. You live with 5 other guys in an apartment meant for 2 people. Bunk beds crammed into what used to be a living room, laundry drying on every available surface, the smell of instant coffee and cigarette smoke soaked permanently into the walls. 2 of the guys are Polish like you. 1's Romanian. 2 are Bulgarian and barely speak to anyone. You all understand each other anyway, in the specific way people understand each other when they're all a long way from home, and all a little bit scared, and none of you would ever say that part out loud. You work for a subcontractor who works for a subcontractor who works for a subcontractor, and somewhere at the top of that chain is a company whose name you never even learn. That's how it works when you're at the bottom of a big job. You don't know who you're really working for. You just know when the van picks you up in the dark and when it drops you off after the light's already gone. The foreman is German, built like the concrete you're pouring, and he's got a habit of docking hours off your timesheet if he doesn't like your face that week. The first time it happens to you, you try to argue, your bad German cracking under the pressure of trying to sound like someone worth listening to. He looks at you, barely interested, and says, In broken English, because he can't be bothered with your language either. There's 10 more like you on the bus tomorrow. You shut up. You need the job more than you need to be right, and that's a lesson that sits in your stomach like a stone for a long time afterward. You get fast at reading the site, fast at reading him, at knowing which mornings to stay quiet and which afternoons he wants to hear that the job's ahead of schedule even when it isn't. You pick up German out of pure survival, not because you want to, but because every word you don't understand is a word that could get you hurt or get you cheated or both. Both of those things happen to you anyway, more than once. The scaffold moment comes in your second year, on a job outside Wiesbaden. Wet morning, gray sky pressing down low over the site. Everyone rushing because the schedule's slipping, and rushing is cheaper than admitting the schedule's wrong. There's a missing guardrail that nobody reported because reporting things gets you labeled as difficult. And difficult men don't get called back the next Monday. You slip reaching for a strap and catch yourself on a cross brace with one hand. 4 stories up, boots scrabbling against wet steel for about 2 seconds that stretch out like 2 years. You don't fall. Somebody below shouts something you don't fully catch. But you spend that whole night lying on your thin mattress with the ceiling stain staring back at you, doing the math. How many years of this can a body actually take? How many more mornings like that one before your luck runs out instead of holding? That's the night you stop thinking about surviving Germany and start thinking, quietly and stubbornly, about beating it. There's an older guy who works a different site nearby, another Pole named Tomek, from somewhere near Lublin originally. Though he's been in Germany so long, his Polish has picked up a strange accent of its own. Everybody just calls him the old man, even though he probably isn't 50 yet, his hands permanently stained with grout and his back bent from decades of kneeling in other people's bathrooms. He runs his own 2-man outfit doing renovation work, small jobs, kitchens and bathrooms, nothing glamorous, driving around in a van older than you are, but he owns that van outright. He sets his own hours. Nobody's docking his timesheet because there is no timesheet, there's just him. A pencil, and an invoice with his own name printed at the top. You start doing small side jobs with him on weekends for a bit of extra cash, holding tile while he cuts it, learning to mix grout the way he likes it. He doesn't really teach you the trade, not properly. He teaches you the other thing, the thing that actually matters. Over a beer, after a long Saturday, tile dust still in his eyebrows, he tells you, kid, you can pour concrete for someone else your whole life and die with nothing to show for it. Or you can learn to be the man who sends the invoice instead of the man who waits around for one to be paid. That sentence rearranges something in your head permanently, the way certain sentences do when you hear them at exactly the right moment in your life. So you start saving in a way that's almost stupid. No new clothes, no nights out with the other guys even when they tease you for it. Sending a little money home the way Merrick did, but keeping most of it hidden in an account your roommates don't even know exists. You buy your own basic tools first, a drill, a level, a decent set of hand tools you keep wrapped in an old towel under your bed. Then, 2 years later, a beat-up van that barely starts in winter that you spend your Sundays fixing yourself in a gravel lot with a borrowed manual and cold hands. Then you sit in a government office filling out badly translated paperwork with a clerk who's clearly done this 1,000 times and doesn't care whether you succeed or fail, and you register your own small business. You walk out of that gray government building feeling absurdly like you've just been handed a passport to an entirely different life. The first jobs are tiny and a little bit humiliating if you're honest with yourself. A garage conversion for a retired couple who watch you the whole time like you might steal something. A bathroom for a guy who pays you half in cash and half in his own homemade plum brandy that could probably strip paint. But you do the work right, every time, on time, and you never disappear on a client the way half the cowboys in this industry do, the ones who take a deposit and vanish. Word travels slow at first, one recommendation at a time, and then all at once. Within a few years, you're not a one-man band anymore. You hire your first 2 guys, both Polish, kids not much younger than you were when you first crossed the border. Then one Ukrainian kid straight off the same kind of bus you came in on years before. Nervous, thin jacket, 40 euros to his name, and something in his face makes your chest tighten because you recognize it completely. Then comes a German apprentice, which feels like some kind of milestone you can't quite explain properly to your mother on the phone, because in her mind, Germans hire Poles, not the other way around. You run that crew the way you wish someone had run yours, paid on the day, every single time, no games with the hours, no docking anyone for a face you didn't like that week. You feed people on long jobs out of your own pocket. You tell them straight when something's wrong instead of letting it fester into resentment. It's not charity, and you're careful to never frame it that way. It's just the version of this industry you wished existed when you were the new kid on that first bus with no German and no idea what was coming. The company grows faster than you fully understand how to manage, if you're honest. A warehouse contract turns into a multi-unit residential job, which turns into commercial fit-outs, which turns into projects scattered across the country. Frankfurt, then Munich, then Hamburg, your van replaced by a small fleet, your evenings spent on spreadsheets instead of scaffolding. 3 guys become 15. 15 becomes 60. You stop being the guy swinging the hammer and become the guy signing the tenders, sitting across desks from bank managers who, 20 years ago, would have looked straight through a guy like you weren't even in the room. 20 million euros a year in revenue. Sit with that number for a second, because you still do sometimes late at night, alone in an office that used to be somebody else's dream before it became yours. A kid who wasn't smart enough for university by the standards of the people back home who used that exact phrase about you more than once, built something that size out of concrete dust, stubbornness, and a stranger's advice over a warm beer. And every year, deliberately, you make a point of hiring more kids exactly like you were, straight off the buses, no German, no plan beyond making it through the first winter. You give them what nobody gave you. Real contracts instead of cash-in-hand promises, training instead of just labor, a path upward instead of a dead end with a paycheck loosely attached to it. Which is exactly why the biggest disaster of your career hits as hard as it does, because by now this isn't just your life on the line anymore. Your company lands the largest contract in its history, an 8-figure multi-site development, the kind of job that changes a company's entire trajectory if it goes well. 3 months in, the payments start slowing down. Then come the excuses over the phone, always calm, always reasonable sounding. Cash flow issues, delayed drawdowns from the bank. Then comes the silence, calls that stop being returned. Then comes the shell company move, the developer restructuring itself into bankruptcy on paper, while the actual people behind it walk away clean and untouched, and you're left holding an invoice for work you've already fully completed that's now, legally, worth almost nothing at all. You understand exactly what that means in real terms. Sitting alone in your office at 11 at night with the numbers open in front of you. It isn't just your money. It's 60 families' wages. It's work visas tied to steady employment for guys who have nowhere else to go if this collapses. It's every promise you've made, personally, to every kid you've pulled off a bus and told, "Stick with me, I'll take care of you," the way nobody ever said to you, "You're not going to be the man who breaks that promise." So you drain the company's entire cushion. Then you go further than that, sitting across from a lawyer who tries to talk you out of it, and you sign against your own house to cover the gap because the alternative is watching people who trust you get nothing, the exact thing that almost broke you all those years earlier as a 19-year-old with docked hours and no recourse, and no one on his side. Every single one of your workers gets paid on time. Everyone, without exception. Even though, for about 4 months, you genuinely don't know if the company, or you personally, will come out the other side of it still solvent. You do come out the other side, eventually. Slower, leaner, smarter about contracts now. Deposits demanded up front. Penalty clauses written into everything. No handshake deals ever again, no matter how trustworthy someone seems. The company keeps growing past it, actually, because word of what you did that year travels through the industry just as fast as word of the good jobs had years before. People stay loyal to a boss who bleeds for them instead of one who disappears the moment things get expensive. So here's the part you weren't ready to hear at the start of all this. Running at that size, for that long, under that kind of pressure, takes something from you that a bank statement never shows anyone. You and your wife separate 2 years after that contract nearly buries you, not because of one big dramatic fight. Just years of you being physically in Germany, and mentally on a job site 3 states away. Missed birthdays that quietly turn into missed years. A person who fell in love with a 19-year-old who had nothing and slowly, without either of you quite noticing when it happened, lost him to a man who had everything except time left to give her. Your parents back in Poland are proud of you. They say so on every single phone call. Your mother still asks if you're eating properly, but there's a distance in those calls now that 20 million euros never quite manages to fix. You send bigger envelopes home than Merrick ever did back when you were watching him do it from across that kitchen table. It doesn't feel the same sending them as it did watching him hand one to your mother all those years ago. So, if someone asks you today, standing in front of your own site office at the end of a long week, watching dozens of guys who call you boss the exact same way you once called somebody else boss, whether it was worth it, the honest answer is, you don't fully know yet. You built exactly the life you set out to build, every piece of it, on purpose. You just didn't understand. Back at that bus station with your mother crying and your father's grip lasting a second too long, that it was going to cost you a completely different life to get there. That's the story. Concrete and blood, like the old man used to call it, back before you ever had a company or an office or 60 men calling you boss. Take it however you need to.